Hey everybody, welcome back to the Convo Couch. I am Fiorella, and I am here with Jonny Sue on the ones and twos. Pasta is out of town, and I will be going out of town as well. So I really felt the need to do a really strong, a really quick dive into what's going on in Haiti, because it's really important what's happening right now geopolitically with what we're seeing with Haiti and Cuba. One of the things I pointed out in my last video is the lack of coverage of Haiti during the entire 3 years that they have been massively protesting against their corrupt regime. And the mainstream media coverage for Haiti was never there, right? It is now there only because of the death of the former president Moise. But before that, they weren't covering it at all. And all it took was for a small group of a couple hundred people in Cuba for the mainstream media to exploit that and talk about it in a way that is completely just juxtaposed to how they talk about Bolivia, for example, when they were protesting for over a year to get their country back after Evo Morales was couped and ousted from the country. So you have to pay attention to these things. And as we know, the regime change playbook is always hyper involved. The Western regime change playbook is always hyper involved when it comes to deaths of presidents and coups. So let's just get started right off the bat. Did you plug in your mic? Okay. I want to start off with something that a lot of people may not know. There was this time when Hugo Chavez said about Haiti, after canceling the debt in 2010, he said, Haiti has no debt with Venezuela. Just the opposite. Venezuela has a historical debt with Haiti and their people, for whom we feel not pity, but admiration. And we share their faith and their hope. There was this whole situation that happened, and let me pull out the historical context. There was Latin America's debt to Haiti. It's the one below it. So Simón Bolívar, right? He was the guy who gained independence for much of South America, including Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, Panama, from Spain. This is why the currency for Venezuela is Bolívar, los Bolívares. And he received extreme help from Haitians right at that time under Alexandre Pétion for his military campaigns. Pétion supplied Bolívar with 4,000 muskets, 15,000 pounds of powder, flints, lead, and a printing press, and asked in return for South America's slaves to be freed. Bolívar left Haiti on April 10th, 1816 for Venezuela, and then returned mid-September of that year to Les Cayes after lost battles in South America. He resupplied Pétion, and he sailed again from Haiti on December 28th, 1816, to then end the struggle for South American liberation from colonialism. So when Chavez said that, that's where this was coming from. So that's just something that I wanted to share with people in regard to the history of Haiti, because that comes into importance when you're talking about the relationships right now that are at play geopolitically. The former DA, one of the accused assassins, right, of the former president Moise, was a former DEA informant, and the Miami Herald, I believe, was the one that actually first started talking about this. And the Miami Herald actually does decent work for a local newspaper. They have been some of the best in terms of getting some of these stories out, actually.
Didn't they have like an Epstein story? I think?
They had an Epstein story. They do really
way
great.
Before everybody else.
Yeah, they do really great local work. I love to recognize people that I see consistently. Another thing is that there's a lot of Haitians in South Florida, right? And so there's kind of like this convergence there. I would like to actually go over there and see if I can find anything else out. But a suspect in last week's assassination, this is from the Miami Herald, of Haitian President Jovenel Moise, was once a confidential source for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, or the UEA. This is what two agency officials told them. Monday, the Miami Herald and the McClatchy Washington Bureau, both of these have been working in cohesion, learned that the suspect is Joseph Bertrand Vincent. He was first arrested more than 20 years ago for filing false information on a U.S. passport application, and then went on to become a DEA informant. Once he was identified and arrested, along with James Solanges, who we're going to talk about in a minute. James was 35, Vincent is 55, and they were hired supposedly as translators, right? But he reached out to the DEA. So Vincent actually reached out to the DEA once he was actually became a suspect, which is really interesting, right? And then so the DEA then was forced to actually reveal one of its sources. So that's pretty obvious that there's something there, right? Okay, so that's what happened. Now, another thing that also we have to go into is who exactly were the others, because there's several. There's the two American trained Haitians, and then there's also the Colombians. So we're gonna go into this for a minute. Mint Press did a wonderful article by Dan Cohen. Dan Cohen wrote an article kind of just talking about everything in general, right? So I urge everybody to read it. But I'm just going to read a couple of things here from the very beginning. It's essential to understand that the people involved with the assassination of the former president had ties to the bourgeoisie, the elite of Haiti, a very, very small elite, that is, these oligarchs. So the two, like we said, that were identified were James Solanges, who was 35, and Joseph Vincent, 55. Solanges lived in Fort Lauderdale, where he was the CEO of a company called EJS Maintenance and Repair, and ran a nonprofit group. But the website has since been scrubbed from information. I think I posted the picture, Johnny. You can show them that it's been scrubbed. Prior to being in Florida, he lived in the southern coastal city of Jacmel. And the Washington Post also said that his Facebook profile has since been removed. He was listed as being the chief commander of bodyguards for the Canadian Embassy in Haiti, and the Canadian Embassy confirmed this as well. He was an avid and vocal supporter of the previous president, Michel Martelly, and that president was the founder of the same party Moise was a part of. So that's something I wanted to point out. Now let's go deeper into James Solanges, because he, like I said, he was the chief executive of this company, and launched a nonprofit in March of 2019, and this is from the Washington Post. He was focused on supposedly humanitarian effort in Haiti, which is really interesting. It was based in Tamarack, Florida, and reported a revenue of $11,388 in 2019. He was described as a building engineer specialized in the field of infrastructure development and a certified diplomatic agent. And we already talked about his work as a bodyguard, which is important if you look at what he's being accused of. And there's a little bit more on him being a bodyguard. He was also described as a diplomatic agent, and this is from globalnews.ca. An advocate for children and a budding politician on a website for a charity in 2019, that same charity we were talking about. He also described himself as an actor as well. And a spokesperson for Global Affairs Canada told Global News that they were aware of the allegations against him, and he was briefly employed as a reserve bodyguard by a security company hired by Global Affairs Canada. That's just double confirmation that he was, in fact, employed as a security guard. And just so you guys know, one of the things I do want to point out is that the Haitian Times, which has done also great work on this, and they have been very careful because they're afraid of blowback, and they have stated so themselves. The Haitian Times reported that Solage also used to work as a security guard for both Reginald Boulos and Dimitri Vorba. These are two very prominent members of Haiti's very small bourgeoisie. And initially, they were friends, right, with the former president, but then they became opponents of Moise. And Boulos, who is one of the key figures here, one of the ones that is suspected of funding this whole operation, was involved in the previous coups in 1991 and in 2004 against President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. So the Haitian Times also said that he was very close to, Solage was very close to Vorbe, and that he was his right-hand man. So he was very close to this elite, these oligarchs that were suspected by people in Haiti, right, to funding this, especially Boulos and Vorbe. So you can see this tweet if you scroll down on the Haitian Times article that that he also worked as a security guard for them and their businesses. On social media, multiple people said Solage has worked as a security guard in Vorb's and Boulos's businesses, and this person, if you click on the tweet, they on Mint Press, they pointed this tweet out. Emanuela Duyon, who said, "I am shocked by the news of the assassination of former President Jovenel Moise. This shows the extent to which violence reigns in Haiti. Justice must be served. We, the Haitian people, must stop the current political crisis and end the vicious cycle of violence." And then below, somebody replied, "Assassin James Solages, brother of your friend Newell Papdomi, Pascal Solages, he worked security for Dimitri Vorbe and worked at Nissan with Reginald Boulos. The assassins were in 5 Nissan patrol cars, the same cars Boulos sold to the Haitian police. The truth will come out." So a lot of people in Haiti are kind of diving into this. They all suspected something, even though this president was not loved by the vast majority of the people in Haiti, the working class, which is the majority of people in Haiti. They were still smelling something fishy. We recall we've covered it last week where the DEA agents were saying they were talking in Spanish. They were saying DEA in Spanish. But of course, there's something there that story was that account was denied, that they were told, oh, these people weren't DEA. However, now we're seeing that they were trained in the United States or involved with people from these agencies, the DEA. And just to reiterate, many believe that Boulos is the actual author and financial backer of Moises' murder. So that's what's at play here. That's what's been coming out. The link to the DEA from Vincent, and also the link to the oligarchy from the other gentleman that was also involved, Solages. Another thing I will have to point out is the Colombian Assassins, right? Because this whole thing, what are Colombians doing in Haiti, right? And if you go to this website in Spanish, you can find out a lot of information on who these people were, particularly one man. His name is let me pull it up 1 second. His name is Manuel Antonio Grosso. Around 15 Colombians have been implicated in this whole attack, but Manuel Antonio Grosso was captured for the murder of the former president. He turned out to be an army soldier, part of the Battalion de Infanteria Simón Bolívar. Many of these other Colombians, including this man, were part of the Ejército Nacional, or the national army, right? They were part of this national army. According to this article, eltiempo.com, among Grosso's preparations was special command instruction from the United States military, which supplies training and weapons to the Colombian military, one of the most brutal forces in the area. We know that the United States has used Colombia as just a means to threaten everybody else in the region that has been named by multiple people in multiple countries, including in Peru when I was just there. And of course, just a reminder, the DEA, right, was named by Pedro Castillo's party as the leader in being the biggest drug cartel that we know of. So this is very status quo for the DEA, but a lot of people don't know this. So this particular force, right, this particular force in Colombia pushed by the United States is one that tends to secure international corporate interests, especially regarding drug trafficking. Like I said, the DEA and Mint Press did a dive on other members of the hit squad that were alleged to have killed Moise. Let's go over some of their names. Duberni Capador Giraldo, who was a retired deputy first sergeant. He was killed in a gun battle in Haiti. Alejandro Giraldo Zapata, which is the guy we were talking about. John Jairo Ramirez Gomez, and Victor Alviero Piñera. So, of the 28 people who are allegedly participated in the assassination, according to Mint Press, 4 of the Colombians arrived in Haiti on June 6, 2021. Grosso arrived in the Dominican city of Punta Cana and crossed the land border into Haiti. Remember, Dominican Republic and Haiti share one territory. You guys can see the photo of the gentleman right there. Show him and the other suspects in tour sites. So they were like having a little tour there. You can see them. He's on the left. So one of the questions that a lot of people are asking is, didn't the president have security? What happened to his security? Why wasn't his security official there? What was going on with all of that? And that's one of the questions I was asking, right? Because you would think that a president would have ample security. And it turns out that he didn't. Like, so, and we've seen time and time again in assassinations where, somehow the security guards or the people protecting X person aren't there. So CEPR is the website. This is the Center for Economic and Policy Research, right? The head of Haiti's Palace Guard, subject of U.S. law enforcement investigation into arms trafficking. So apart from everything that's happening, Dimitri Herald is the head of the General Security Unit of the National Palace, and he is also under investigation by the United States government for arms trafficking. And that's simultaneously going on. There's no evidence, right? There's no actual direct evidence to any of this, but there are different pieces tying these people to, like the oligarchs, the EEA. But there are rumors linking him to the murder. Herald is one of the individuals most responsible for the safety of the president. So this guy is the one that is supposed to be the 100% with the biggest charge in protecting the president. And yeah, so it's really interesting. He was involved in Haiti in 2012 and worked there. A lot of these people are in the military. They're high ranking. They have some sort of connection to intelligence, if not in the United States, in their countries. So that's not coincidence. But we can only show you what the ties are. We can't 100% conclude anything because there's only circumstantial evidence. But it seems like the Haitian upper class, the elite, with Jovenel was kind of at war with them. They were getting tired of him. Initially, he was supported by them, right? And then they turned on him. It seems like these people, along with former DEA and along with former high-ranking military Colombian muscle, right? The military officials that I just named are linked in the murder of Moise. Now, one of the bigger things here is that according to the New York Times, Claude Joseph, right, right now is the describing himself as the prime minister. He is at odds with Ariel Henry. Ariel Henry was appointed by Moise to replace him. However, due to like an intricacy of just confusion, Claude Joseph took over, and he's heading Haiti right now because of the assassination. He literally went out there and actually requested to send military forces to guard the key areas of Haiti, including the ports, the airports, and the gasoline reserves. And then Jen Psaki came out and actually said that the U.S. would reinforce more personnel to Haiti with none other than FBI and Department of Homeland Security deployments. So, yeah. Who is this guy? Claude, right? Who maneuvered himself into being the head of Haiti. Well, like I said, we've shared this woman's tweets before. She's Madame Boukman. She does constant updates on Haiti. This was from July 4th. Look what she pointed out. CEI's NED created fake student movement, GRAFNE, in Haiti in the 2000s, which partnered with the bourgeoisie mafia to destroy the nascent and promising democracy the poor majority fought to establish. Remember, that was the coup, right, of the actually good president of Haiti. Current de facto puppet MPM Claude Joseph was one of the NED's minions. You can see him here. He was a member of this, right? And that's his picture right there. Well, he's the current prime minister now, and he's the one in communication with the United States and Jen Psaki, who is now sending DHS and FBI into Haiti to supposedly protect their ports and their structures. And so it's really interesting. This isn't coincidental. And I just had to point that out as well. So if you go, Jonny, to her tweet, I just want to show her profile. One of her most recent tweets. Just recently, she says, Val Demings and her fellow Democrat counter-revolutionaries claim to support a democratic transition in Haiti. Now she's endorsing a pre-rigged election. It was about eliminating the puppet that became a liability to save the right-wing ruling puppet party. What did I say the day this happened? I said, this has to do with the election. Why? Because I knew that they were having elections in September. And even though Jovenel was not liked by the vast majority of the people in Haiti, and he was a puppet of the West, he was souring his relationships with the bourgeoisie and the United States. So if there was a fair election, he'd be kicked out. Haitians would have picked somebody that they actually liked. But the West could not allow that. The West had to do something to stop this from happening, to stop a fair election. So now what they have is a rigged election, and they get to choose who to put in. And that is what this is. That is what I was saying from the start. When the elections are so close, there's no way. And so she goes on to say they promised critical support to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, and all Haiti got was increased military presence by UN, quote, peacekeepers, mass rape, cholera, and 2 stolen elections. The goal is to continue to subvert Haitian popular democracy and Haitian self-determination. So there you have it. And this is from the mouth of somebody that's there and that's been there for a long time. Jonny, did you have anything you wanted to add?
To Haiti, no, that's good on Haiti. I just wanted to show that PSL Web put this up about Cuba.
Yep.
In the same Caribbean area. More than 60 years ago, the Cuban Revolution toppled the U.S.-backed dictator. The new government began the revolutionary process of building socialism. U.S. corporations like United Fruit owned vast plantations, and they were thrown out. The revolution cut rent in half, and 2 years later, they abolished landlordism. I didn't know a lot of this. Mm-hmm. Illiteracy had been rampant. The Cuban Revolution taught 700,000 plus adults to read and write. From the first day, the U.S. government attacked and tried to sabotage the revolution. The U.S. tried to assassinate Fidel more than 600 times, but they failed each time. And the U.S. has has a blockade of Cuba bans the U.S. blockade of Cuba bans any company or country from trading with Cuba. The U.S. blockade caused shortages of food, fuel, medicine, and other vitals. Right? Sanctions kill. So end the blockade.
Yeah. So on Cuba, I urge everybody to watch the video I did yesterday. It was a deep dive into why the history of Cuba. Some people are like, oh, well, you're just regurgitating Cuban state propaganda. It's not the same thing. Okay, you have a Goliath here. You have the West that is trying to push a coup, right? And trying to say, oh, the Cuban people aren't happy. They're not showing the vast majority of people are in favor. Are there unhappy people in Cuba? Of course, there are unhappy people everywhere. Do we sometimes leave out like some of the things that Cubans, that are different in Cuba? Absolutely. For example, like I said in the video, in Cuba, they are allotted a certain amount of money and a certain amount of food, rations. That is like their system. But sometimes people want more. So what they do is they get side jobs in tourism, because that's largely what a lot of people survive there from. And they turn like their homes into like casitas, where tourists come in and stay, or they'll be taxi drivers. In Cuba, they pay a doctor the same that they would pay other people that aren't doctors. That could be a controversial stance. Whatever our opinion is about Cuba, whether you agree with their ideology or whether you like their government, whether you're angry that there's only one brand of beans, one brand of rice, whether you see that as a limitation of choice, that is up. That's your opinion and you're entitled to your opinion. What I am saying is that we cannot allow that to manufacture consent for intervention, which is what the United States is doing via the very manipulated mainstream media. Like compared to Haiti, compared to how quickly, they were covering this more than Copa America, more than the Euro Cup. They're trying to say that, oh, the Cuba wants freedom. But under the West, do you think Cuba will have freedom? If you go back into history and you look at as to why people in Cuba rose up against Batista, I kind of went over this yesterday, but just to reiterate, Batista worked with mafiosos in Cuba and the United States from the 1920s on to make Cuba what in Spanish they would refer to Cuba as the bitch of the United States. That's what they called it. Because in Cuba, there was ample prostitution, there were drugs, there were alcohol, especially during the time where there was prohibition. They ended up exploiting Cuban resources, just like the United States exploits all of the global South's resources, but none of the wealth went to the Cuban people. It actually went to several elites, Batista and his people. They also enslaved many Africans in Cuba. And a lot of these people that were with Batista had slaves. They were pissed that when the working class revolted, that their way of life ended. And that's where that comes from. That's where that whole sentiment comes from. Yes, Fidel Castro enacted some measures that by our standards would be authoritarian. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You can't equate that with the United States. Because, again, what do you do when you are, David and facing the Goliath of the empire? The empire, look how close Cuba is to the United States. It's a miracle, right, that Cuba is not under the submission of the West. And that happened because of the measures that Fidel took. You can agree or disagree with that, but imagine if things had been a little bit different. And I think you have to take that into context in terms of that. If people in Cuba are unhappy, they have the right to revolt. What shouldn't happen is the United States manipulating and exploiting a situation, as they did it in Hong Kong, to further create this idea that, oh, we have to support freedom. And it was rich of Marco Rubio and rich of Joe Biden and this administration to talk about they don't have freedoms in Cuba. They don't have free speech. look, they can't say anything. Are you serious? Are you serious right now? Have you seen America? Have you seen that everybody's labeled a domestic violent extremist? That people are going to knock on your door if you haven't taken the vaccine to talk to you? That Julian Assange is still in prison for exposing Western war crimes. I mean, I don't get tired of saying this because I don't think people understand. Like, when you talk about freedom, what we view as freedom is more commercialism. You know, like what this country views as freedom is, oh, great, we have all these varieties and brands. But what is freedom is being able to speak out against your government that is actually preventing you from getting anything. One of the things Cubans have, as Jonny pointed out, is really the health. They have healthcare. They have lifted their people out of poverty. Their illiteracy rate is among the highest in the world. The advances they have made in medicine are some of the most advanced in the world, in spite of the embargo, in spite of the blockade, in spite of the United States constantly making it impossible for them to, not just the government, but the people in Cuba, to receive aid and money, in spite of all of that. So one of the things I want to do is go to Cuba. I want to go to Cuba as soon as possible and really get to the bottom of this, because I think that sometimes, you know, we do gloss over things on the left, that there is dissent. I'm not saying there's not. There is dissent. There's reform. There's attempts to reform things. But to think that the vast majority of Cubans want to overthrow their government, it's false. We have seen the videos side by side, right? How the reality versus what they're trying to show. We've seen them use fake videos of Argentina, for crying out loud. They wouldn't need to do that if this was genuine. So is genuine dissent real? Yes. Is it what the mainstream media and our government, our neocons and neoliberals becoming best friends when it comes to Cuba, is that genuine? No. Like, that's America trying to once again take over another country that is independent of the boot of their empire. So I really just wanted to point that out. Okay, so Trey Wright, I got some super rays here. Thanks you guys for coming on. This is going to be a quick show. Sending love your way, fam. Thank you, Trey. I really appreciate it. No offense. Love everything you three do. Thank you. No offense. Hi, Roar Media. How are you? Reef Barker, the Convo Couch received a tip. It's always appreciated on the couch. Fred Edward, dealing with a lady on Twitter screaming she wants Biden to demand communication out of Cuba be reconnected, but she also called the doctors that travel the globe slaves. Interesting. Okay. I think that's it. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Let me see who's on YouTube. I just want to say hi to all of you on YouTube really quickly. We're going to be out of town, but we will be streaming as much as possible while we're out of town. Let's see who's here. Soul Construct, thanks. Love seeing you on the chats. I saw you yesterday. Thank you, Jilly Love, for moderating. We need some more moderators. I'm gonna do that. I only see you moderating. Thank you guys so much for being on there, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion. All right, guys. Convo out. See ya.